These are stats you're going to want to see before week 4 in fantasy football. And let's start with the Kansas City backfield and the splits from last week and how this workload was divided for these running backs. So a lot of people spent a lot of their waiver budget on Carson Steele, which may have been stupid, may not have been. But when you're looking at him versus Pirine, first of all, these were the only 2 running backs that saw the field. I would expect that to be the case. Kareem Hunt, everybody was talking about him basically because A, they knew his name, and B, he played for the Chiefs once. Outside of that, he's completely irrelevant. There was no reason he wasn't on a team. But when you're talking about the running back usage in this game, Carson Steele was the lead back here. 46-28 on all plays against Pirine. Yeah. Obviously dominated early downs while you saw Pirine play mostly on third downs as the receiving back. That makes a lot of sense, right? Now they only had five third downs, right? And so the goal line carries, you had Carson Steele getting 2 of them, Pirine getting 1 of them, which is good to see those. Clearly, Pirine is the 2-minute guy. Carson Steele is the short yardage guy. And so in terms of who is the lead back here, I think it's Carson Steele. Mm-hmm. He led in snaps, he led in routes, he led in carries. So I think he's going to have a floor of about what you saw last week of about 8 points. So if he gets a touchdown, he's going to have 15-point upside. So I think this is going to make him borderline flexible. However, again, the main thing here with Carson Steele and what makes both of these guys really not ideal flex guys is you have Carson Steele losing the receiving upside and the receiving upside, that kind of floor that comes with that, to Samaje Perine. Third down stuff, that's all going to Perine, right? And they're using Perine as a receiving back. The other thing is with Perine, you have him losing goal line carries to Carson Steele. So the 2 most important factors in determining fantasy production for running backs, you have these guys taking them away from each other, which is why both of these guys may have, 15-point upside, but probably not more than that, unless you get multi-touchdown game from one of them. And in reality, I don't expect that from this offense and these backs. So while they both looked, in their roles pretty decent, and they both, I do think, are rosterable and in some cases flexible on your fantasy teams in deeper leagues, clearly what we took away from this game is that they're going to take certain aspects of fantasy production away from each other, making both of them pretty limited. And while you do feel good about having them in your roster, you're probably not going to want to start them unless you have to.
Yeah, totally agree there. And then let's move over to the Falcons game, or the Falcons side of the game. And I want to look at some of the snaps and the routes run here. You've obviously got Drake London up top. He's always going to be the leader. He's the best wide receiver there. And then you see Ray McCloud. You're like, oh, good for him. 31 routes run. He gets 3 targets, but he's on the field quite a bit. Darnell Mooney, nice. Wait, pause. Where's Kyle Pitts? Oh my gosh, you got to move all the way down to 42 snaps and 25 routes run. He was out-snapped and out-routed by Ray McCloud and Darnell Mooney. I understand this has to do a lot with the personnel and what they're doing offensively and schematically, but with Kyle Pitts, for a guy that you were betting on having pretty incredible upside and potential with Kirk Cousins throwing him the ball, this is not what you want to see from a snap and opportunity perspective. If he's on the field being out-snapped by by those 3 receivers in Atlanta's offense, and Kyle Pitts is basically a receiver, right? He should be out snapping these guys, and he's not. And he was out targeted by Darnell Mooney and Drake London. He only had 5 targets this week. Again, against a tough matchup, a good matchup against the Kansas City Chiefs, very good defense. But look, as gross as tight end is across the board, I'm not any more comfortable with Kyle Pitts than most of the remaining tight ends that you're comfortable starting every single week. Like Kyle Pitts, aside from a nice week 1 performance where he scored a touchdown, he hasn't really done anything. You're looking at 11 points in week 1 against Pittsburgh. Good for him. 5 and 7 points in week 2. He's had 3, 4, and 5 targets in the first 3 weeks of the season. And I know we need to be patient to an extent because Kirk Cousins is still kind of establishing himself and establishing chemistry with those receiving assets in that offense. But he's establishing chemistry with Ray McCloud and Darnell Mooney and Drake London before he is with Kyle Pitts right now from a volume perspective. So that's definitely something that I'm a little bit concerned about. Again, you're starting Kyle Pitts every single week because it is just so disgusting right now across the board at the tight end position. But he definitely ain't looking like a league winner right now.
No, definitely doesn't. Let's jump up to the Colts here and let's talk about Adonai Mitchell, because you saw Josh Downs come back this week. And when you're looking at the snaps and routes run for this offense, you had Josh Downs running 16 routes on 32 snaps. Michael Pittman and Alec Pierce still leading the team in snaps. And then you have Adonai Mitchell, 7 snaps, 2 routes run, 1 target this week for AD.
Holy crap.
So he's essentially, you're dropping him in your fantasy leagues.
Wait. You mean Josh Downs is going to get more work than AD Mitchell is?
Well, the actual kicker here to me is that we told people that AD Mitchell was in competition with Alec Pierce and that Alec Pierce was winning and people didn't believe us. We live 20 minutes. It's that way. 20 minutes from Lucas Oil. Like we know the Colts. And AD Mitchell, at this point, you drop him. He's droppable in fantasy leagues. I think you have to drop him. He's not done anything when he has been on the field. Now he's not on the field.
Yeah.
And so
you can't even start the number one option. So.
And so for Downs had 5 targets, and he did have limited work. Like I said, I think you see him get more snaps and split less with somebody like Doolin moving forward. So Downs, when he does get that increased work, what this means for him from a fantasy perspective is that you still can't start him because he plays for the Colts, and Anthony Richardson's still his quarterback. And so, honestly, we shouldn't make a big deal about any of this. Adonai Mitchell is droppable, but honestly, with the way that Michael Pittman has produced, you could say Michael Pittman's dang near droppable. That's obviously hyperbole, but what I'm saying is, if the wide receiver 1 in this offense doesn't matter, the wide receiver 3 doesn't either. And so this isn't really a big storyline in the sense that, if you have AD Mitchell, you should probably just clear a roster spot at this point.
Yeah, over on the other side of that matchup, you had the Chicago Bears and Caleb Williams throwing the ball 55 times, basically. And Rome Odunze, definitely the star of the show here and going to be the biggest name. A lot of people are going to be interested in what we should be doing with him. And here's the breakdown. He had 89 snaps, which was 3 more than DJ Moore. So he was pretty much on the field for every single snap, never took a break. 55 routes run to DJ Moore's 54. He had 11 targets to DJ Moore's 10. I mean, both of these guys are going to be productive, and he definitely took full advantage of Keenan Allen not being on the field for the second straight week. Now, what is that going to look like when Keenan Allen comes back? I don't know, probably not like how it looked in week 1. I think at this point, I'm willing and comfortable enough to bet that Rome Odunze is going to be the second option behind DJ Moore, and Keenan Allen is going to be the third guy, the odd man out there. Even though Keenan Allen out-snapped and out-targeted everyone week 1, that was Rome Odunze's first game in the NFL, and you're seeing with Keenan Allen not on the field, Caleb Williams and Rome Odunze are starting to figure this thing out, right? You saw even in this game against the Colts, one of the worst secondaries in the league, you had a lot of overthrows, right? You had a lot of underthrows. You also had some really, really good looks that they were able to capitalize on, and one of those was a touchdown, and they were able to, get 11 targets to Odunze here. So, look, I'm being conservative with Odunze's outlook week to week. I don't think he's going to, be super crazy and outproduce DJ Moore consistently for the rest of the season, but he is definitely a viable flex option when you're looking at him not even being startable after the first 2 weeks of the season. I'm very, very encouraged by what I saw there.
So when you're talking about the running back room for the Bears in particular, Roschon Johnson obviously making waves. He's going to be a popular waiver pickup this week already, but he outsnapped everybody in the 2-minute drill, 17-5 on third downs, 10-5, split short yardage. The problem is, though, with Roschon Johnson, because he looked to be the best runner of the game. He got more targets than DeAndre Swift, despite running less routes than DeAndre Swift. If you're picking up Roschon, there's one glaring problem with Roschon and DeAndre Swift. And here's the reason. We really can't start either, because even though he had 4 receptions, 5 targets, he had 10 points, his upside is extremely limited. DeAndre Swift has no upside. Roschon is better, but he is better. Honestly, he is better. But he doesn't have any upside because when you look at the goal line splits, it's Khalil Herbert getting 5 goal line carries there compared to 1 for Swift and 1 for Roschon.
And those 5 goal line carries were good for less than a point for Khalil Herbert on the day. I
mean, Khalil Herbert, with the way that they're splitting up,
every single one of them is unstartable.
Every single one of them. You don't want to start any of these guys. So you can pick up Roschon, but he's going to have a cap ceiling. And honestly, at this point, Shane Waldron is on my list. I'm just going to say that.
He's blacklisted.
He's on my list because you could have a startable running back here in Roschon, in my opinion. He's good enough. He has enough upside. He was a good enough prospect, in my opinion. And if he got goal line carries, he got a touchdown. Look, you're talking about 15-point upside every week for Roschon. Hey, let's flex him. Hooray. But in reality, what you have here is you're going to have Roschon get 5 catches. Okay, Roschon had 7 points. You're going to have DeAndre Swift grind his way to 12 yards on 50 carries. So he might get a couple points. And you're going to have Khalil Herbert, and he's going to have 1 point or 6 points. Did he score a touchdown? 6 points. Hooray, maybe 7, actually, which would be crazy. But look, none of these guys are startable. Avoid this running back room at all costs. You can pick up Roschon, try to trade him for anything if you can.
Yeah, and Tank Dell, it's just becoming more and more discouraging looking at Tank Dell and his usage. Yes, he had 45 snaps. Yes, he had 7 targets on 39 routes run, which was just 10 to 12 less than Stephon Diggs and Nico Collins on the day. There's one glaring difference between what this looks like in week 3 versus the previous 2 weeks, and that is Joe Mixon is not in the equation because Joe Mixon was not starting because Joe Mixon was injured and Cam Akers was playing, and that was absolutely horrible and disgusting to watch. Look, Tank Dell lost 11 snaps, again, as it compares to Collins and Diggs without Joe Mixon on the field. And he really is the odd man out in 2 wide receiver sets. And you're going to see a significant amount of 2 wide receiver sets with Joe Mixon on the field because they're not afraid to run the ball, even with all those receivers and those weapons. So I'm not super optimistic that Tank Dell is going to be able to transcend situation consistently. He's going to be very boom, very bust, and you're going to flex him when you need to every single week. That, again, when you need to, and hope that he can get a touchdown here and there. But again, he's going to be very touchdown dependent. When he doesn't get a touchdown, he's probably going to get like 8 points or less. It's just the way that the cookie has crumbled, and I am very sad.
Yeah, cookies do indeed crumble. Let's talk about the cookie crumbling for the Los Angeles Chargers and their wide receivers. And this one's interesting because like we can talk about all this, but in reality, like Justin Herbert, if he's not on the field, there's none of this is going to matter. That being said, Quentin Johnson led the team in snaps, led the team in routes run, but did not lead the team in targets. You had Ladd McConkey leading the team in targets. And I think what you have here is you have a guy in Quentin Johnson who is going to be, more of an X wide receiver than Ladd McConkey for sure. Although I think both of them can play both positions because it's kind of weird. You can have Quentin Johnson in the slot and you've seen him do okay there. But Ladd McConkey, a lot of people think of him as like a slot dedicated receiver when he doesn't necessarily have to be. But you have Ladd McConkey getting the type of targets that a slot gets, and you have Quentin Johnson getting the type of targets that a next gets, right? You see him Quentin Johnson has scored 3 touchdowns in the last 2 weeks on basically go routes, right? And so Quentin Johnson's going to have touchdown upside, and he's getting the opportunity, and I think he's going to continue to hold the opportunity when Josh Palmer comes back because I think he has taken a step forward in his game. He looked like a pretty good prospect. Now he's taking a step forward. Ladd continues, though, to be the wide receiver 1 from a target standpoint. It's probably going to have the highest floor of anybody, but his ADOT, this reminds me of JSN, his ADOT is so low that you see his production is extremely limited. 7 points in his last game despite having 6 targets, despite playing 72% of snaps on the field. So it was against the Steelers. But both of those guys are going to be good for different reasons. If you want the touchdown upside, you're going to go QJ. If you want the floor, you're going to go Ladd. If you're not going to have Justin Herbert, you don't want any of them, to be honest with you. So it's just going to be interesting. I think you will continue to see this trend kind of play out for the Chargers. And honestly, the receivers have not been the issue this year. So they've been a little bit better than I expected them to be.
All the talk in Tampa has been Bucky Irving eating into Rachaad White's workload. And while that is valid and relevant, and he is getting some opportunity there and has shown to be more explosive and has really earned his way to get more opportunity in that offense, it still is very, very Rachaad White heavy in that offense. He still is going to be the top option, the top guy there. You're looking at all plays. It's 38 for Rachaad White to Bucky's 14. Early downs, it's 20-6. Goal line carries, Rachaad White's still getting the goal line carries. Short yardage, it's 6-1. Third down, 6-1. 2-minute drill, Bucky Irving has the upper hand in the 2-minute drill. What does that remind you of? Samaje Perine, right? Bucky Irving is a very Perine-esque. He's got that explosive ability. Less is more with a guy like Perine because he's so small but so explosive. If you limit his opportunity in this type of offense and then you put him on the field here and there, he really is going to make it difficult for your opponent, right? And Rachaad White is still going to get a majority of that workload. Look, he's going to be considerably more efficient than Rachaad White is because he's kind of like Alexander Mattison to Dalvin Cook back in the day. He is going to get probably a few more carries here and there because he has shown that he can capitalize on that opportunity like he did in week 3. But I mean, overall, his upside is just going to be limited when you're seeing all of the goal line opportunities going to Rachaad White, short yardage, third downs, passing uses. The passing volume is still almost all going to Rachaad White because he's so effective in the passing game.
Let's talk about the Titans. And do you think maybe that DeAndre Hopkins could actually be the wide receiver 1 there instead of Ridley?
I'm still going with Ridley because he's out snapping, out routing, and part of it is, I mean, in that matchup last week against Green Bay, I'm still betting on Calvin Ridley. I think he's going to be fine because you have the ones matched up against Ridley.
But the reason he's out snapping and out routing,
Alexander,
I mean, DeAndre Hopkins is because they've been easing D-Hop in from injury. Every week you've seen them gradually add more work. Yeah. So like when they're playing the same amount of snaps, but even then you're seeing him, run 30% less routes, and he's still getting double the targets this week than Calvin Ridley did. Yeah. So
I'm following the money personally, and I think Ridley's going to continue to get.
So you've seen Hopkins continue to get snap percentage increases, so that's nice. And again, as he continues to heal and hopefully stay healthy, I think he's somebody you can flex.
He's a viable flex option.
In fact, I'm going to flex him in the Flock League this week over, well, if I have Kenneth Walker back, I'll flex Kenneth Walker over him. But if it comes down to Keon Coleman and D-Hop again, I'm not making that mistake. But again, he led the team in targets, and he had 20 points last week. So it's looking pretty good for D-Hop, honestly. And then Pollard and Spears. Look, Pollard, he led in snaps, he led in routes, he led in carries. He's a running back 1 there, right? Yeah. The problem is the offenses looked fairly hit or miss to start the season, mostly miss, honestly. Especially Will Levis has been fairly miss. And as a result, you've seen Tony Pollard's production every week decrease, and he only had 6 points last game. On 6 carries, he only had 14 yards. He did have 3 receptions, but again, when you're getting 6 carries and no touchdowns, it's like, I mean, he's a running back 21 on the season. So at this point, I think we need to temper expectations for the entire offense. I honestly thought the offense would be a little bit better than it was, but I think it was because I thought Will Levis could be at least semi-competent, and he's proving me wrong. So
Zamir White preseason was being drafted as high as like 7th, 8th rounds, and oh my goodness, what a fall from grace. Zamir White. I literally put a T at the end of Look, he is the RB3 in his own offense in week 3. He's lost snaps. He's
losing snaps
to Amir Abdullah. Like, how long has Amir Abdullah even been in the league at this point? Yeah, I feel like he's been in it for ages as a journeyman running back. White is a true drop candidate at this point. His lack of usage all over the field is incredibly discouraging. It sucks. I mean, people were being conservative with his usage, even with him being projected to be the number 1 option there in Vegas, and he's still disappointed. Like, this is surprising to me. I mean, the goal line carries in week 3 entirely Alexander Mattison. They all went to Alexander Mattison. 2-minute drill, Amir Abdullah and Alexander Mattison. Zamir White was not in the equation. 3rd downs, Zamir White was not in the equation. Short yardage, no Zamir. Early downs, 3-way split between Mattison, Abdullah, and Zamir White. And then total plays, you have Mattison and Abdullah getting more opportunity both than Zamir White. This is awful. Absolutely awful. If you own Zamir White, you are 1 week away from cutting him. You can cut him now, and I wouldn't blame you.
And then the last guy we're going to talk about here in the last situation is Michael Wilson. And Michael Wilson actually had a pretty good target share this week. He had 9 targets on 53 snaps. He led the team in snaps, led the team in routes run. Actually, him and Marv both did. And then he was second in the team in targets by 1.
He outsnapped Marv.
Yeah, he did outsnap Marv. I mean, by 1. They're both playing the whole game.
Yeah, I know. It's still
but still, this is encouraging for Michael Wilson. And honestly, with Trey McBride not playing this week, he could be a sneaky start. He didn't have a touchdown, and the thing about not having a touchdown is when you get 9 targets, odds are you're going to be able to at least produce a little bit. And Michael Wilson last week had 14 points, and again played 90% of snaps, had 9 targets, 8 receptions, 64 yards. And so this is good for Michael Wilson. Michael Wilson was not a bad prospect coming out of college, and so it's not
3rd round pick.
It's not totally out of the realm of possibilities that Michael Wilson actually ends up cementing a role in this offense ahead of Greg Dortch. Again, the thing is, you did have McBride playing 50 snaps in this game compared to Michael Wilson's 52. So he really was productive with McBride on the field. And so Michael Wilson's honestly a sneaky waiver pickup. If you could probably stash him before this week, I think that's not a bad idea to do, because again, he looks like somebody that could get a fair amount of work and continue to be respectable in fantasy football. So there you go. Those are some stats you need to know before week 4 in fantasy football. If you enjoy this video, make sure you drop a like on the video. And if you play fantasy football, do us a huge favor and make sure you are subscribed as well. We'll give you fantasy football content the entire season, but it really helps us out when you do those 2 things for us. Really appreciate you guys. Thanks so much for joining us, and we'll see you later.